Hey, what's up guys? My name is Sal, and this is another Expedition Log. Today we're continuing our tour around Baltimore City, headed west to the oldest market in the United States. As always, I hope every one of you are doing well out there. Last week, in part 2 of the ExLog Phase 4 Baltimore Saga, we covered Harbor Place in the Inner Harbor with its 2 pavilions and a gallery. This week, I'd like you to come take a walk with me through West Baltimore City to investigate the ominous shadows of the world's famous Lexington Market. But first, this week's ExLog sponsor, a masterclass in extreme customer service. Enjoy.
Customers first. Customers first. You're looking.
Hi, how you doing today?
Hi, how are you?
Hi, did you find everything you need today?
How do you like this weather?
Good morning. Would you like a cart?
See, that's a nice pin you're wearing.
Oh, I see you picked one of my favorites here.
React. Sometimes it's easier said than done.
Together?
Excuse me, I couldn't find the bean sprouts. Could you help me?
Bean sprouts? I don't know where they are. Would you like fresh or canned bean sprouts?
Can.
Look, I got a lot of people here.
She not only handled the situation correctly, she smiled.
Wait a minute. That's not the sale price. It's supposed to be $2.49.
Let me call to verify the price.
Hey, you! Can you get somebody over here?
Notice, she didn't make any commitment before she verified the price.
Oh, excuse me. I have a rain check for that cake mix. I got a better idea. Why don't you huh?
This is an excellent opportunity to add that personal touch to each customer. Now, how about that customer who unknowingly makes a mistake?
Hey, mister, not so fast.
What's wrong?
You see the signs? Well, can you read it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't
You're
realize
not
that.
allowed in this lane. It's
Next time I'll remember. Thank you.
If handled correctly, customers understand.
Joan, I've got a turn-in for you.
Oh. Now you're gonna have to wait around until we count it up. No problem.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could I please have paper bags? I'm sorry too, lady. I've already bagged them. Here. You can have them.
Sometimes the game isn't over until it's over.
No problem. Just our way of saying you.
The more she struggles, the less he notices.
Hey, once they're bagged, I'm done.
And thank you. It's customers first.
Customers first. Customers first. You're looking good.
When you roll up to the Lexington Market, one of the first things you'll notice is the market claiming to have been established in 1782. That claim is a bit misleading, so let's jump back in time and unpack that a little bit. John Eager Howard, captain turned colonel in the American Revolutionary War, 5th governor of Maryland, U.S. senator, and president pro tempore of the U.S. Senate for 6 days. He drew a map in 1782 of his plot of land on Howard's Hill in Baltimore, indicating that a market should and would be built there, and he donated the land so commerce could commence. The market opened a new covered shed in 1803 for what we know today as a farmer's market, and it was named the Western Precinct Market. Local vendors were selling their goods, and a bell would ring at the opening of the market at 2 a.m. on Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday, closing by noon with another bell ringing. By 1818, the local community was thriving and flocking to the Western Precinct Market. So Howard bought more land to expand the market due to its incredible success, with farmers traveling from Reisterstown and Towson, rolling up with their horse-drawn carriages filled with produce, dairy, and meats. Famed philosopher and poet Ralph Waldo Emerson visited in the mid-1800s and promptly named Baltimore the, quote, gastronomic capital of the world, close quote. The Western Precinct Market thrived through the 19th century, but in 1900, the raggedy old shed was replaced with a long wood and steel structure named the Lexington Market. The Lexington Market would draw massive crowds and provide a great income for the vendors, including the famed Smith and Fadleys, who had been in attendance since 1887. But in 1949, an hour and a half after the market opened, an electrical fire broke out at 3:30 in the morning, and despite 6 fire engines responding, the entire structure was lost in just 2 hours. The community was devastated, but resilient. And in 1952, a brand new building was dedicated for the Lexington Market, with crowds flocking to the new space, including many new food stalls, much more open walking space, and the new location for Fadley's, which would continue its success well into the modern age. Here we are in Baltimore City's West Side. In the last couple of ExLogs, we explored the beautiful heights atop Federal Hill, the East Side in Jonestown with the Old Town Mall in all its decrepit glory, and a trio of ailing malls comprised of Harbor Place at the Inner Harbor, masterfully renovated in 1980 by legendary real estate developer and lifetime Marylander Jim Rouse. Today we're here in the West Side to explore the oldest market in the United States, specifically the remaining open structure at the eastern building of the world-renowned Lexington Market. As we learned in the prelude, a fire broke out in 1949, destroying the old Lexington Market. But due to the resilience of the community and the tenacity of city planners, officials, and real estate developers, a brand new building was erected in 1952 to replace the burned down structure from the 1949 fire. This is the direct area around Lexington Market, looking down into its seedy metro stop, which is currently sealed off from entrance into the market. In the first part of the Phase 4 Baltimore saga, it looked like this section of the city was completely abandoned. These latest episodes were filmed while I've been under lockdown and staying at home, with lots of local stores closed. I can't travel far to film remote locations for the channel just yet, so I've been trying to make the best of it by filming what I could in Baltimore so I can still deliver content to my ever-growing tranche of faithful subscribers. We're closing in on 40,000 subscribers, and I'm humbled by the recent uptick in activity, so I'd like to thank all of you a ton. You guys rock. While the first part in my Baltimore saga made the city look pretty well dead, I wanted to show what it's like now that the Lexington Market has reopened, along with other businesses in what used to be Baltimore's garment district in the late 19th century through the second decade of the 1900s. Many of my viewers don't live in Baltimore or even the United States.
I'm good, dude.
So I wanted to give a fair representation on what any of you could expect if you visited the world's famous Lexington Market, which we're in right now. And many of the reviews that you'll find online are from outdated travel sites like Yelp and TripAdvisor. So take my video as evidence on what you might expect when coming here if you choose to do so. But right now we're inside the original 1952 structure that was built directly after the fire that ravaged the shed from 1900. This was built directly to the right of it. I've been to the Lexington Market countless times. As a matter of fact, my dad, Captain Sal, who you've seen in many ExLogs, would take me to visit a few of the remaining enclosed markets in Baltimore on weekends to get stuff to cook for dinner back when I was in high school at the Baltimore School for the Arts, and also when I came home from college during breaks. It was sort of a tradition for us to go out and pick up the meats and fresh ingredients necessary to make a nice Sunday gravy with spaghetti and meatballs. But to be completely honest, Dad and I mostly went to Di Pasquale's in Highlandtown for the Italian food stuff. But we would head over to either Lexington, Broadway, or Holland's Market, one of the three, to get lunch depending on where we were in the city. I never really batted an eye when we were at these city markets, and I felt safe when I was there with my dad, and we never really ran into any trouble.
Hi there, sweetheart.
I'm not playing down the fact that there's obvious crime throughout Baltimore City, but if you keep your eyes open and avoid placing yourself in precarious dark corners for extended periods, you should be just fine. Right now we're coming up on Fadley's, which, as I said in the prelude, opened at the Lexington Market in 1887, and it began serving their famous food in 1941. Fadley's is most famous for their crab cakes, serving hundreds per day to weary travelers. As a transplant from New Jersey, I wasn't immediately initiated into the Chesapeake Bay culture, and stuff like crab cakes weren't really my thing when we moved here. But after visiting Fadley's a few times, crab cakes quickly became one of my favorite foods. My dad has this way of convincing people into doing things that they might be apprehensive about. And when I was a teenager in high school, my main thing was skipping class to get those succulent buffalo fried chicken breasts at Hooters with Fritz. I had a simple palate. I was a teenager. and I was way more into going to a place like the Gallery at Harbor Place than here at Lexington Market, which looks pretty much identical to when it was built in 1952. It looks like you're in the New York City subway, and it smells and feels that way too. So when I first came here, I was pretty grossed out. It wasn't appealing to a kid like me that grew up surfing on the Jersey Shore, but my dad coerced me into looking at the world in a more open-minded way. Him prodding me into eating at a place like the Lexington Market and Fadley's helped free my mind to experience some really awesome stuff. So, thanks, Cap. We live in an incredibly strange timeline right now. Back in the 1950s, the energy that the community brought to this new establishment couldn't have been anything other than electric. However, in the 1950s, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was leading his civil rights movement, taking time to personally inspire local religious groups in Baltimore to adopt his preaching style and peaceful means of protesting institutionalized racial discrimination and segregation. It was also in the 1950s that drug use began taking Baltimore by storm. Heroin use was blossoming in cities across the US, and by the end of the 50s, the Baltimore police had over 1,000 records on file from drug addicts in the city. This number might seem small today, but the amount of undocumented cases was most certainly staggering. Along with the rise of drug use came massive reports of shoplifting and robbery, mainly in the former garment district, where the Lexington Market is located. Into the 1960s, the drug numbers had more than doubled and were exponentially rising. But that didn't halt retail operations, and in 1964, this very grocery store opened, called Hurling's Grocery Basket, bringing some much-needed steady traffic to the Lexington Market.
Excuse me, darling. I'll sneak by here. Thank you.
Despite the shiny new grocery store, crime was still spreading like a virus across Baltimore. As drug use expanded, so too did the price of drugs, inflating nearly 3 times as what they were selling for in the 1950s. Due to the increase in drug price, burglaries, robberies, and increasing homelessness were on the rise due to an incredibly declining economic platform, which was cutting the city right through its heart. And then, on April 4th, 1968, Baltimore dropped to its knees when the news arrived of the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. However, the city quickly jumped back up to their feet to mobilize, with widespread riots breaking out across Baltimore. There were nearly 1,000 businesses looted, vandalized, or burned down. The rioters specifically targeted liquor, grocery, and furniture stores, and most of the shops affected would never reopen. The damage was vast, and would lay the groundwork for the future of Baltimore, with many neighborhoods going without retail offerings or grocery stores. Through the 1968 riots, 5,800 rioters were arrested across Baltimore City, with 700 people injured and 6 dead. The crisis finally came under control after 4 days, when then Maryland Governor Spiro T. Agnew sent 5,000 National Guardsmen in, imposing an 11 p.m. curfew, with another 6,000 U.S. Army combat troops mobilizing under orders from President Lyndon Johnson. The effects of the riots would reverberate for decades, as many would flee the downtown area, moving to what they considered safer ground in Baltimore County. I absolutely adore the aesthetic of this place at a truly fundamental level. It has that Cold War era federal government look with painted cinder blocks and easy to sterilize porcelain tiles along the walls, doors and conservative features that you'd find in most schools built in the same era. I'm a sucker for this look, because you really don't see it much anymore unless you attend an elementary school that's never gotten a remodeling, or if you walk into a government facility. Walking into either of these really isn't advised unless you've got some business to attend to in there, so don't do it. Everything just seems to only have a functional purpose on the second floor, with no mind to artistic or pleasurable aesthetic value. Random windows for a secretary or boss to shout through to avoid personal contact exist in this space, and as a matter of fact, both the secretary and boss could shout at the same person at the same time if they wanted to through those windows. It's all business up here. No fun is to be had by any means whatsoever. Now, I get that this space on the second floor is for the management office, so it's not necessary to create a pleasing customer environment. Everything up here is for utility. It's to make the machine work in the least attractive way possible to deter loitering and congregation. But come on, the typeface chosen for labeling entrances looks like a 4-star general stared at a Bob Ross painting for 15 seconds and learned fun. The colors they chose are so brutal too. White and red, nothing more, nothing less. Even the employee break room looks like something out of Orwell's 1984. No fun was ever had in this room, and trust me when I say this room stunk. It stunk like hot, sweaty garbage. Granted, some of this might not be original, so if you've got pictures of this place looking different, please sound off down in the comments, because I'd love to see that this place looked differently at some point. When I used to come here back in the day for lunch with Dad, we would grab our food and head through the mezzanine to the arcade to sit down and eat. That's what the arcade was primarily used for, but it did have some food stalls in there too. The arcade was recently demolished, but I'd be remiss if I didn't show it to you in this episode. You would enter the arcade through that drywall. The Lexington Market arcade was built in 1982, directly on the spot that the original 1803 shed used to reside. This was also the same spot where the fortified structure from 1900 was until it was burnt down in 1949. The arcade was notorious for having numerous shady areas, and crime ran amok through here, which ultimately led to the decision to seal it up and tear it down. But the Lexington Market arcade played a massive part in Baltimore's downtown revitalization efforts, which I'll get into after we take a sketchy elevator ride. If you've been following my series up until this point, you know that I'm no stranger to doing the things that I warn you all against doing. So please don't take my example in any of the situations you see me ignorantly placing myself into, like cornering myself in darkly lit corridors in malls, getting lost and nearly suffocating from being locked into mall guts and stairwells in abandoned structures with rampant claustrophobia and no cell service, and also taking every opportunity to ride elevators that may or may not have been serviced in the last decade. My most recent expedition out to the Lexington Market was no exception, and I just had to take the elevator. When the rear door opened, it scared the hell out of me. It didn't feel like the elevator car was moving, and I really thought that I was trapped in there, staring at concrete bricks where the basement of the arcade used to be. When I mashed the buttons, it still didn't feel like I was moving. Now, I know I wasn't in any real danger, and I know that if it was stuck, I could press the fire department button to get help. But at that moment, with my mask on, thinking I was surrounded by the virus from 1,000 people, I had what I like to call a landmark mall moment, where I thought everything was over. Make sure you watch my landmark mall episode. You'll know what I mean. If you guys go out exploring, please make sure somebody knows where you're at. But thankfully, I was brought back up to the first floor, and I decided to get the hell out of there to get some fresh air and explore some of the outdoor parts of the Lexington Market before coming back inside here for one last look.
Appreciate it.
In ExLog 69, we took a walk around Harbor Place at the Inner Harbor, which was brought to life by the legendary planned community and mall developer Jim Rouse in 1980. This was all part of then Mayor William Donald Schaefer's grand plan to revitalize the downtown region of Baltimore, bringing new life into an area that suffered horrible crime and economic collapse through the 1970s as a direct result of the 1968 riots. Mayor Schaefer wanted to bring the city together and to give the community something positive, and with Harbor Place in 1980 and the National Aquarium in 1981, he directed his efforts to the west in downtown Baltimore City to bring the community something they hadn't seen in 33 years. In 1982, the Lexington Market Arcade was opened on the bicentennial anniversary of the original market on which the new arcade stood in its place, which is the site you're looking at right now. As you can see, it's been demolished. More on that in just a bit. As we cross North Paca Street, you can see Lexington Market West. This structure consists primarily of a massive parking garage, but there is a small stretch of vendors and stalls inside which had recently closed for renovations. Lexington Market West opened alongside the East Market, which we were just inside. The West Market is the smallest of the three buildings that made up Lexington Market, including the 1982 arcade. When they were moving the earth in preparation for the market's construction back in 1950, crews actually found a series of pathways and catacombs under the ground, which is partially preserved to this day. Now, of course, we have no way of knowing what those catacombs were officially used for over time, but if I had to guess, they may have been used in the 20s and 30s to smuggle booze during Prohibition, and possibly for either cold storage or curing meat. They could have also been used for more nefarious intent by gangsters or mobsters, or they could have even served use to Harriet Tubman as part of her Underground Railroad. We'll never truly know. Speaking of Harriet Tubman, what you're looking at now is the abandoned Tubbs Restaurant and Lounge, which opened at the Lexington Market West in 1987, situated directly atop the ruins and catacombs. I've made a few calls to gain access to the catacombs and Tubbs, so stay tuned, I might be able to bring you all on a walk down there. Tubbs closed in 1990, and as the Lexington Market traversed the new millennium, things weren't looking too bad. In 2001, it was named, quote, the best way to introduce outsiders to Baltimore, close quote. And in 2006, it was named, quote, the best place to take out-of-town visitors, close quote. Both titles being given by the Baltimore City paper. In 2012, the Lexington Market got some national TV love when Travel Channel's Adam Richman stacked Fadley's famous crab cake sandwich against Washington, D.C.-based W Hotel's chicken club sandwich. Fadley's crab cake sandwich unfortunately lost. But trust me when I say, those crab cakes at Fadley's are the absolute best in town, and there is no substitute. If you come to Baltimore, you have to try Fadley's crab cakes.
Yep. Thanks, bud. Thank you, darling.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Despite the initial surge of traffic to Lexington Market following Mr. Richmond's visit, Baltimore City would find itself in the throes of yet another riot in 2015 following the death of 25-year-old Freddie Gray while he was in police custody. Riots broke out in West Baltimore demanding justice for Mr. Gray and widespread calls for racial equality. Buildings were burned, officers and civilians were injured, with hundreds of arrests and hundreds of businesses closed permanently due to looting, overall destruction, or inability to sustain cash flow in the aftermath of the riots. Lexington Market also suffered due to the 2015 riots, seeing a sharp decline in customers and sales. And 1 year later, then Mayor of Baltimore Stephanie Rawlings Blake introduced a massive redevelopment project which would see the old arcade razed completely and a new structure built in its place with a more open floor plan, outdoor areas, and abundant sunlight. The project would cost between $30 and $40 million and was chosen over a cheaper renovation to the old structure because it was just so visually and structurally compromised. The community fought back against the idea, and frankly, I was also pissed when I heard that it was getting torn down, but the mayor had made her mind up. In July of 2018, the East Market closed down due to health violations when a video emerged on the internet of a gnarly old sewer rat climbing around inside of a bakery display, walking all over the food inside of it. Needless to say, the public wasn't amused, and many vowed never to return to the market. By mid-January of 2020, all of the tenants that were in the old arcade had moved out into the East Market, and the arcade was shuttered.
What's upstairs?
But once spring came around, COVID-19 hit, and despite plans to remain open during part of the renovation, the entire Lexington Market was closed down. It wasn't until August that the East Market would partially open with curbside delivery. And while some forgot about the sewer rat incident, lots of others just didn't bother venturing out to get their food there. Vendors and eateries closed by the handful, and even with its soft in-person reopening on July 23rd, tons of vendors couldn't return due to the economic fallout business lost during the COVID pandemic, not to mention the gnarly old sewer rat incident, souring the public's opinion of Lexington Market. But if you're in town, you can visit Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., and I highly recommend it. It's a great place. Ever since COVID-19 hit, I've been pretty cautious about ordering and eating food indoors at restaurants. And most recently when I visited here at the Lexington Market, it was no exception, and it was a pretty big drag. Fadley's and other awesome food stalls were clearly open, but I just wasn't feeling it the day I filmed here. It would have been such a hassle with the mask and the sanitizer and everything, so I just didn't eat there that day. Maybe sometime in the future when everything's back to normal, I'll head back here and show you guys some of the food, but for now I think I'm going to keep my distance. I'd like to thank all of you for watching my video. This Baltimore saga has been a ton of fun to produce, and I've been fortunate to have places around me to film while staying at home in these past months. If you aren't already, and since you made it this far in the video, you may as well subscribe and ring the bell. It seems you're into this kind of stuff, and you're still with me, so do me a solid and follow me here and all my various social media for updates. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, @SalvatoreAmadeo. You can find me on Facebook if that's your sort of thing, @QuiteStudios. And you can check out my website, salvatoreamadeo.com, where I host the ExLog, which is a written account for each of my expeditions, and I'm slowly building that up. I've got a set of forums on there where you can give me your input on certain places. And soon I'll be opening the X Mall, which I'll be using to sell merch, stickers and paraphernalia and all sorts of stuff, so keep an eye out for that. Make sure to also join the Deb Malls of Discord server, which is absolutely free to use. You just need to download Discord and click the link down in my description. Thanks especially to my patrons who support my expeditions directly, and everyone out there that's been following me for this long. You guys rock, and I really appreciate the support. There's lots more coming up, so stay tuned for ExLog 71, where we head up to the Mondawmin Mall. But until then, stay safe out there, everyone. Take care, and have a fantastic day.